that Clienttrack's dealing with. Basically, we are a practice management solution for accounting professionals. So we don't have any role in the financial aspect of running a practice. So there's simply QuickBooks and all your tax packages, and they all do a wonderful job. But we're addressing a very different need, and the need is the fact that you have a lot of clients, and a large part that every accounting professional has to face is to chase those clients, and you're constantly chasing after the clients to get their paperwork and to get missing information and that kind of thing. And the real world is that you're working with wonderful, dynamic, exciting business owners, but from their point of view, doing the accounting bookkeeping isn't necessarily their first priority. The bookkeeping and stuff like that is a necessary evil that every business owner has to do, but it's not a task that will generate that business owner to direct revenue or impact their business from a productivity point of view necessarily. So sometimes, in the case of a lot of business owners, it happens to be sort of very low on the priority list. And for accounting professionals, that's a big deal because you're chasing these clients and you're trying to work with these clients when sometimes what you're trying to get from them isn't their first priority. So that's just sort of the nature of the business. So what we've done is we've realized over the years that when we talk to our clients that there's five key issues that accounting professionals face, and we work really, really hard to solve these, because the more we can solve them, the more efficient you can be and the less time you're going to spend in inefficient operations like chasing clients or running around your office trying to determine is paperwork in, that type of thing. So our thought philosophy is to treat your process and procedures in terms of chasing your clients, in terms of getting information in, like an assembly line. And the more automated we can make that assembly line, the more easy it is to track the process of the assembly line, the more efficient you're going to be, and that leads to a couple benefits for you guys. It means that you're going to be more profitable because you're going to be able to add on more clients without having to take on the extra burden of lots of inefficient time. It also means you're going to be more productive, which ultimately means that you're going to be more profitable. So I'm going to go through these five key issues from start to finish, and I'm constantly going to refer to this as an assembly line. It's not perfect. There's a real world. There's always distractions. There's always things that come up. But the more we can treat it like an assembly line, the better off we're going to be. And then for most of the presentation, I'm going to actually show you the software and show you exactly how the software works in order to be able to solve some of these issues in terms of the chasing process. So if we start, the very first of the five issues is to determine which client's deadlines are due. So that's number one. Ultimately, you have to know all the deadlines you have to meet in order to be able to complete them on time. And generally, that's a pretty straightforward process, but it's not completely easy because a lot of clients are going to be on different payment frequencies as based on the fiscal year. Some clients are going to have a lot of things due on a quarterly basis, which means that on a given month, you're going to have a subset of your clients do 1 month and then a different subset do the next month. So sometimes it's difficult to determine that. So the very first thing is we solve that by making it very easy because Clienttrack has all the federal and provincial deadlines built in. So you can create your own deadlines, so scheduling all your tasks for each of your clients becomes quite easy. So you can see in the screenshot, and again, we're going to go over this in the actual software, and I'm going to show you. But you can see in the screenshot that for each client, I've got Sample Beauty Salon, and we've divided all the different major tax types into convenient tabs. And we make it easy because you can schedule all the tasks that you have to do for the entire calendar year. And Clienttrack will tell you exactly what's due when. So at least the very first problem is solved. You have complete access to a definitive list on what you need to do so that that's no longer a problem. So then now we look at the client component of this. So now we're dealing with the clients. And the second issue of our five issues is you want to notify all your clients of all their upcoming deadlines. Because if you want your clients to be able to bring you your information on time, you have to take the effort to at least tell them when to bring it in. And to tell them all at the beginning of the year, this is when you need to bring stuff in, isn't necessarily sufficient. They usually need to get a nice reminder prior to that task coming due throughout the year to say, hey, don't forget, your GST is due at the end of the month, would you please bring your stuff in? So what ClientTrack does is we actually do that notifying for you and by using emails. Now we actually have the ability to generate faxes and letters or to remind you to call the client, but for the most part you want to try and email the clients as much as possible. They prefer to get emails, and emails means much less time and effort on your part. So the advantage of our feature is that you've got all your clients, and quite easily you could have thousands, upwards to 10,000 different individual tasks that you have to do for all your clients combined. So ClientTrack is a really cool feature where you can literally send out 10,000 emails to your clients before the task comes due as a really nice preemptive notification to the client to say, hey, your task is coming due. Would you please bring in your information by this date so that we have enough time to do that? And if you want your clients to be proactive in bringing your stuff in, you need to be proactive in notifying a client. And this is a beautiful solution because it's easy, it's automatic, and ClientTrack can generate all these emails that you don't have to type in. You still have full control over the process, and I'm going to show you that as we get into the software. So then if we look further down our assembly line, we get into issue number 3 of 5. And at this point, we've now notified the client that their tasks are due, and they've got a nice email in their inbox. So the next step, of course, is now you need to determine which clients have brought their information in. And what we do is, this is really where the assembly line philosophy becomes visually apparent, because you can see in the screenshot we have a series of check marks. And these check marks are very, very flexible in terms of you define these, you define what steps you want, and it's very, very flexible in you indicating exactly what you need to do. So the first step in this particular assembly line would be to notify your staff internally when the paperwork comes in. And so it's a best practices. The people who've implemented ClientTrack really well in their offices, what they do is the moment the client walks in the front door, there's going to be a point person who will meet the client at the front door, and that person will record in that moment that, okay, the paperwork has come in. They can type in any quick notes that they might want to convey to the person who's going to eventually prepare the work. They can then also, if you're getting into a paperless office type environment, they can scan the documents, they can do that thing. But all of that work gets done immediately at the front door when the client brings it in, so that everybody in real time can see that. And that's really, really important, because when we start getting into issue number 4, the next step is managing the workload. So we all have so many hours in a workday, and we want to, ideally, we would love to work within those hours. Now, most of us are working a lot of overtime and a lot of extra hours to do this stuff. But the fact of the matter is, let's assume that we all want to work a nice 9-to-5 job, 40 hours a week. But we have all these tasks we have to get done, and each of those tasks takes a finite amount of time. So we just have to make sure that there is enough working time available with all the staff to complete all the tasks in a realistic manner. So one of the ways that we work to solve that is that we give each task what we call an estimated time. So this is separate from time and billing in terms of actually recording your real time and then billing that time to your clients. This is actually a forecasting feature. So you can have the ability to tell ClientTrack exactly, how much time you think the task is going to take, and it's quite flexible, and obviously different tasks are going to take different amounts of time for each type of client, and you can put those tasks in your staff's calendar like an appointment. So your staff can see, okay, I'm budgeted from 9 to 2 to work on this particular task that's going to take me about 5 hours to complete. Now, you have to take into account the reality of the world we work in, that there's going to be lots of telephone calls. There's going to be lots of days where half the day will be taken up by last-minute things, telephone calls, all the fires that you need to put out. So we need to accommodate for that. We can't pack our days completely full with these tasks, or otherwise we're just going to be faced with unrealistic expectations. But the ability to be able to see the task in a visual manner like this in the calendar, and to say, okay, this is what I've got. I actually have the ability to get the task done. And it's nice because each staff member, but also managers, can see who's got heavy workloads, who's got light workloads. They can shuffle tasks around. They can easily determine if they get a last-minute job from a client and they need to spend an extra 3 hours to do a special accommodation for a client. They would be able to see, number one, do we even have the capacities in office to handle that special request? And if so, who is the best person from a calendar scheduling point of view to handle that? Okay, so that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. Okay, and then we get to the last issue, or 5 issues. And basically, this issue is, of course, your time tracking. So this is sort of the more admin type component of running any kind of accounting professional practice, in terms that you have to get all your stuff done, but now you have to have some way of billing your clients. Now, there's many different philosophies in terms of how we record the time. Do we record the time? Do you do value billing? That kind of thing. In terms of ClientTrack has the ability to accommodate many different types of billing philosophies. So we're not of the mind of one particular philosophy over another. We're just simply giving everybody the choice to handle the billing whatever way they would like. So if you would prefer to record how much time you're spending on the tasks and thus on your different clients, but then do a separate value billing type invoice where you're billing a flat rate, you would be able to compare your actual costs in terms of time to what you're receiving in terms of revenue from the client, and you'd be able to determine if that is a realistic balance and whether you're making a profit on the client. If you want to do exclusively value billing, or if you want to bill your invoices directly off the time, all of those are very valid options. So ClientTrack gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of that. But this is a big issue that every accounting professional office has to spend a lot of time in terms of managing, in terms of doing this, and however you might do that, ClientTrack can accommodate that. So just in a quick summary, I'm now going to open up the software and show you how the software does a lot of these things. But that's really what we're solving in terms of our software. We're solving the human aspect, the client aspect, and the practice management aspect of running your accounting practice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up ClientTrack here. Okay, so this is ClientTrack. So this is the actual application. And just before I get into it, I'll give you a bit of background. So we take all of your clients and we actually divide them into 2 main groups. Your first group of clients is all your business clients. Your second group of clients is all your personal tax clients. The business clients are all of the clients that you're going to be doing some sort of service for, task for throughout the course of a year. So these would be your nonprofits, your corporations, your sole proprietorships, estates, trusts, any client like that you're going to be doing any type of a bookkeeping, a tax remittance, or a year-end type work for. Then separately, we track your personal tax T1 list. And this is a list of all of your clients that you're doing T1 personal tax returns for. We have a special project management component for managing a busy tax season. And we know that a lot of your T1 tax clients are going to be directly related to your business clients in terms of being owners, operators, shareholders, and employees of your businesses. And there's lots of a link in there in terms of the fact that you're going to have a fair number of people who might be associated with multiple businesses. So you might have, for example, Sarah, and Sarah is the owner of 3 different businesses, and she's also been a tax client on the T1 side for the last 10 years. So ClientTrack can associate Sarah with 3 different businesses and 10 years worth of tax years, but there's only one Sarah in the system. So if you change the telephone number for any one of those instances of Sarah, that information gets propagated and updated all across the program. So I won't show you how to set that up because this isn't intended to be a full training session, but we do obviously provide training for that type of thing. But I just want to let you know that we have the capacity to do that so that it makes the program very easy to use and you're not worrying about updating information in multiple different places. Okay, so let's start on the business client side. So let's work with a typical business client, and I'll show you how to schedule the tasks and deal with ClientTrack from that point of view. And then we'll look at the tasks, and then I'll show you the T1 component. We'll look at a few other things as well. So I'm on a client here, Sample Charitable Organizations. You can see the name of the client at the top of the screen, and I can cycle through all the clients. So all of my clients will be in ClientTrack, and I would be able to cycle through and see the information that's specific to that particular client. I can also find the client very quickly, and it's all predictive typing. So if I want to find a client, I can just quickly find the client by the name, jump to the client, and now see the whole profile. If I do a find client, I can also find a client by any information in ClientTrack. And this is very important because ClientTrack is specifically designed to have all of the information fields that an accounting professional could possibly want. So the business numbers, the corporate tax numbers, the provincial numbers, the workers' compensation numbers, all of those are in ClientTrack, and it's all searchable. So if Revenue Canada calls you and rambles off a business number, you can immediately search on that business number and pull up the client's profile. If you get a telephone call and you don't recognize a number, you can do a quick search for the last 4 digits of that telephone number, and ClientTrack will present all the matching options. So for example, if I type in 1234 and just do a find, ClientTrack has actually come up with 2 clients that have, in fact, in this case, the telephone number ends in 1234. But it's found 2 different pieces of information for 2 different clients that match that partial string that we searched for. So I can just simply click on the client that I'm interested in going to and go to record, and we instantly go to that. So it means that all your information's in one spot. It means that it's easily searchable, and there's only one spot where you now have to update in terms of keeping all of your clients' information current for both the businesses, but also all of the people, whether they're employees of a company and or they are T1 clients. So you can see for Sample Beauty Salon, I've even got some neat notes and stuff here. I've got the banking information for this particular client entered, and I've got this funny little note here. It says, do not mention the ex-wife. So that was an example I had done on a previous demo where somebody that had said that was an example that they had run into in the real world. So just this note that will be presented on the screen so that each staff member can see it before they call the client. And these can be notes like the client prefers not to be called between 9 and 12 and that sort of thing. Because there are lots of things that one staff member may know, and there are sensitive subjects for all the clients. So you want all of your staff to be presented with those sensitive subjects so that nobody sort of puts their foot in the mouth in terms of speaking to the client. So these are the little things that we have, come across when we're working with professionals, and we've integrated them in our product because these little things are the very important things that make running a business successful. So if we continue on, we have this nice list here which we call client service provided. And this is sort of a list of all the different services that you would potentially provide to a given client. And then you just check off which services you particularly apply to this client. And it's just a really nice visual indication that says, okay, we do this client's GST, their payroll, their year-end, their bookkeeping, and their financial statements. So, and you can also use this list as a marketing tool to determine what am I not doing for the client and what additional services can I try and convince the client to pay for so that we can get more revenue from our existing clients instead of having to spend a lot of energy to get brand new clients. And you can customize that list of services to be proprietary to your office. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see this is the information for the people who actually work at this company. So the information here would be the information for the company itself, but the information here would be the information for the people who work. So Sarah Stylus here is the default contact for the company, and Sarah Stylus is the owner of the Sample Beauty Salon. I can have multiple people associated with this company, and if there were more than one, they would be presented in this drop-down. As I mentioned before, Sarah Stylus, as this particular contact, can be associated with other companies as well. So it makes it very easy. The whole system to make that association is just a simple drag and drop. So it's very easy to do that type of thing. Okay, so now that we've looked at the company's information itself, let's take a look at scheduling the tasks for the company. And of course, this is an important part, and this solves our step one of our 5-step process control. So we've divided all the different tax types into nice convenient tabs along the top. So if, for example, I want to schedule the HST, all I need to do is click the HST. And depending on what province you're in, the HST and the GST will be renamed appropriately. So I'm going to switch the toggle here and say, okay, there's no GST payments required for this client, just so that you can see what this screen will look like when you come into a new client. So it's telling me here that there are currently no GST, HST tasks scheduled for this particular client. All I need to do to schedule the task is simply pick the payment frequency. Now you can see that this company is set up as a corporation, and if I click the year-end tab, this client, their year-end, their fiscal year-end is set to January 31st. So if I go back to HST and I select quarterly, ClientTrack is smart enough to realize that the first quarter is due to Revenue Canada in terms of the actual completed return in May. So I'm going to say yes to accept this, and ClientTrack has scheduled the 4 tasks that are required for the calendar year. So it starts with the first one that's due, which is February 28th, but this happens to be the 4th quarter. So this is the officially the 4th quarter in terms of the previous fiscal year, and then we have the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd quarter, which are all due sequentially then in May, August, and November. Now ClientTrack will then schedule the tasks for 2015, 2016, and so on and so forth. So when we schedule the task for next year, we will get the 4th quarter due in February 2015 and the sequential 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, which will be due in the sequential months after that. So it allows you to see exactly what's due within the calendar year in terms of the client. Okay, and it's very, very easy to schedule that. Now, I like to, when I give these demonstrations, sort of show the flexibility of the program in the sense that if you want to change a date, it's very flexible. You just click on it, you can change that date. Now, one of the things that often comes up, as you know, with GST, HST is sometimes for clients, the filing dates don't line up perfectly with the fiscal year end. And so, once again, because we designed this program specifically for accounting professionals, we account for all of that type of stuff. So if I drop this down and say, okay, well, actually, the 1st quarter should be due in March because that's how this client's quarterly filing dates land, I can then select March. I can reselect quarterly. I'm going to select no, and I'm going to say yes to replace. And I now have rescheduled the dates for March, June, September, and December, just like that. Once I set this up, I don't have to worry about it again. ClientTrack schedules these tasks automatically for each sequential year, and it will automatically let me know when these tasks comes due internally so that internally in our office, myself and any staff won't miss anything. Okay, the other tabs are all set up very, very similar. So for the few provinces that have PST, you can quickly schedule the PST for those particular provinces. Under payroll source, this is where we have things like the T slips. So you can see that I have a check mark schedule for the T4, the T4, and the T5, and they are in fact scheduled here. So there's the T4, the T4A, each due on February 28th. Now the T5 is down here at the bottom, and the reason why it's actually scheduled for next February, so February 2015. And if I click the information here, I would be able to see any notes that the person who scheduled this T5 originally has typed in. So let's say somebody was working on this client's year end, and they realize that, okay, I'm going to have to file a T5 next year because the client has just bought some stocks or they have just made an investment that will require T5 to be generated. So they can schedule the T5 the moment they realize they need it for next year, so nobody will forget it, and they can type in the notes to say, why do you need to do a T5? And you can have notes for multiple T5s that you might have to do for a client. So it's these little things that make things quite easy. And you can see that I've also got the monthly source deduction schedule starting January right to the end of December, where the source deductions are each due on the 15th of the month because I have selected, in this case, monthly payroll source deductions. Okay, so everything I need to do in terms of the source deductions in terms of the T-slips are scheduled here, and I don't have to worry about it. Under payroll, this is where we have things like the weekly, bi-weekly, twice monthly payroll where you're actually processing a paycheck for the client. So you can see that I've got twice weekly payroll. So it started June 13th, and I've got all of the biweekly employee payroll scheduled right to the end of December. And again, these tasks will then continue to be scheduled through to the 2015 calendar year once we get towards the end of this year. Under year-end, this is where we have our year-end, and we also have the corporate tax. In this case, the client has a January 31st year-end, and I've scheduled, by clicking the check mark, a task that's due on the client's year-end. So the due date is actually January 31st. Now, from an accounting professional point of view, you don't actually have to do anything on the client's actual fiscal year-end, but it's critical that you know about it, because you want to know when that year-end is coming up so that you can contact the client and say, hey, congratulations on another successful year. We need to start thinking about getting your year-end done. So if you're doing the prep work or you're actually doing the financial statements itself, you need to contact the client and say, okay, we need to get your engagement letter signed. We need to get all this information so that we can make sure that we start the process now so that we can meet the deadlines in 3 and 6 months after this. So it's nice to be able to see a task come up on your to-do list that says, okay, the client's year-end has just ended. And then on that note, we then have the corporate tax tab, which schedules the actual corporate tax return and the payment, each due 3 and 6 months after the year end. So these are the two critical payments you need to know about if you do the financial statement side of a year end, so that you don't miss these two deadlines. And then we get into workers' comp. So once again, the terminology in terms of the workers' comp will change depending what province you're in. In this case, it's called WSIB because that's the workers' comp terminology in Ontario. And I've scheduled, you can see, quarterly. So I've got my 4 quarterly dates that are due for the workers' comp in Ontario. ClientTrack is intelligent enough to accommodate for multiple provinces. So if you have a client who, say, is in the construction industry and they have contracts currently in 3 different provinces, you can schedule workers' comp in Ontario and also in Alberta and, say, for example, in British Columbia. And those workers' comp payments might be on a different frequency. They might be quarterly in Ontario. They might be monthly in both Alberta and British Columbia. And you'll be able to schedule all 3 of those provinces and identify each of them individually. EHT is applicable, I believe, only for Ontario and Saskatchewan in terms of companies that have very, very large payroll. So if you do have any companies that apply for this tax, you can schedule that. we have a tab here called Lawyer, and this is for those accounting professionals who have lawyers as clients, because the lawyers often request their accountants and bookkeepers to do additional work in terms, in addition to the standard taxes. Most of that work is in terms of their trust accounts and all the paper filings that they have to do to the Law Society to prove that they're legitimately handling the trust accounts correctly. Under Other, this is where we have other things like we have the IPTA, the International Fuel Tax that truckers have to collect and then remit. We have the T5018 contractor reporting that the construction industry has to file. We have the case farm insurance for farms where they have to make or do any kind of filings in terms of the Canadian Agricultural Income Stabilization. And then under Custom, this is where you can schedule everything else. So the intent and the concept of what we're doing is every single deadline that you have to do for your clients is in ClientTrack so that it's trackable, it's manageable, and so that you can budget for it, you're not going to miss it. So that also means that you're going to be scheduling in ClientTrack all of the last-minute jobs that clients might be asking you to do, all your custom proprietary work, all of that is going to be in ClientTrack as well, in addition to your standard government remittances that you have to do on a federal and provincial level. So you can see here that I made a quick task as a previous example called print financials, and in this case it was due on June 2nd. So the example I used when I scheduled this for a previous demonstration was that the client calls in and says, okay, I'm having a meeting with my banker next Wednesday and I need to present the banker with the last 3 years financial statements because I'm applying for a loan and I want to expand my warehouse and get some additional assembly line machinery for producing a product. So you want to then schedule tasks which might be due next Tuesday so that you can budget the amount of time you would need to be able to print off and staple together and present the client with the last 3 years financials. So that's an example of the type of things that are going to come up on quite a bit of a basis. The bookkeeping tab allows you to schedule your bookkeeping type tasks. So everybody does their bookkeeping a little bit differently, but you would be able to set up your bookkeeping the way you want it to work. So you would be able to identify, okay, for any given client, are we doing data entry, or are we doing account reconciliation? Are we just sort of double checking their work? So maybe we're just verifying their data file after they've done all the bookkeeping in-house. So, and you'd be able to say, okay, well, how often are we doing this service for a given client? Are we doing it monthly? Are we doing it quarterly? Are we doing it once a year? So you would be able to set up your bookkeeping however you want to do that. And once again, I'm not going to get into the details of this particular aspect. It's kind of outside the scope of my presentation today. But certainly, if you're interested, we would obviously be more than happy to show you how you can do that, so it becomes very easy to use in terms of using ClientTrack. Okay, so I've spent a bit of time on this part because this is a really important part, and it's really important that we show how easy it is and how flexible it is to schedule the task, because this is the first step to our philosophy of the assembly line. And if this first step isn't done well, then the rest of the assembly line is not going to work out. So we make it very easy. You set these tasks up once for your client, and then you don't have to worry about them. You don't ever have to worry about, is everything scheduled? Everything's going to be there, and ClientTrack's going to notify you at the appropriate time. So let's take a look at how you're going to use the task on a day-to-day basis. So if you click on View Tasks here, this is an example of what you would be looking at on a day-to-day basis. So what we were doing previously was just setting up the task, but you would never be looking at those tabs individually, client by client, to try and figure out what your workload is. You're going to come in here, and ClientTrack is going to tell you what your entire workload is. So you can see here that we have this this is basically a to-do list. And you can see that we have the client's name, we have what the task is, we have an in-house due date and a due date, and you can see who's assigned to that task, and then we have a little bit of assembly line. So for the assembly line that I've set up, the first step is you receive the information. That information then gets processed and entered into your financial software, and ultimately we're trying to close that task. I can see lots of other information, so I can see where did people put the paperwork. So I can see we received the paperwork for this biweekly employee payroll, and the paperwork is sitting in filing cabinet 23. So I don't have to look that up anywhere. I can immediately get out of my chair, grab the paperwork, and work on it without having to do what we call the hunt and seek, which is the process of running around your office, opening bankers' boxes, filing cabinets, and paper bags to try to figure out, did the client bring it in, and if so, where is it? I have to now find that. So if we can eliminate that searching process, the hunt and seek process, by having the information right on the screen, then that's over a lot of time. That's a credible amount of time that you're saving in terms of efficiency, so that you can be much, much more billable in terms of generating revenue. I can also see the telephone number and the name of the person I need to call if I need to reach them directly, so it's right here on my screen, and then I can see some additional information here. So this is a list, and it's saying all uncompleted tasks due for where the due date is anywhere between June 1st and June 30th, and also assigned to a particular employee. So if I wanted to say, okay, show me everything for this month, I can just simply say tasks for this month, and it's going to show me all uncompleted tasks due for the month of June. So I can now see all the tasks that are assigned to other employees in addition to me. Okay, everything is sortable, so I can click on the column headers and it will sort all of the dates alphabetically and sequentially. So, and the reason we have these two dates, we have in-house and due date. Due date is the day that Revenue Canada expects us to be done on that day. But as accounting professionals, we often will have to get the task done prior to that particular due date, because we need to get the task done, crunch the numbers, and go to the client and say, okay, your GST is due, you owe $2,000 this month, and we need to give the client a day or two so that they can make that payment, so the payment arrives in Revenue Canada's hands on the due date. So the in-house due date is a nice way for you to identify, okay, we need to get the task done a few days prior to the real due date so that the client has enough time to get that actually in and submitted to Revenue Canada. Okay, so this list is sort of effectively going to be your Bible. This is your definitive one-stop shop to controlling, is it done, is it received. This is where you would go. There's lots of other components to Client Track, but we definitely get a lot of feedback from our clients that use it. This is the first place they look when they come in the morning. This is the last place they double check before they run out the door and leave. Because it basically tells you everything and will make sure that nothing's slipping through the cracks. Now, with this list, you can ask a lot of questions, and the questions are really interesting. And the questions are all generally asked by your advanced search feature, because there's specific things that each staff member is going to want to get out of that list. Ultimately, in a typical office, you might have anywhere between 5,000, 10,000, even more specific tasks that you have to do over the course of a calendar year for all your clients. So naturally, you need to weed through that massive list in order to determine, what can I do right now? What's applicable to me? So you can say, okay, I want to see tasks only assigned to a specific client. So you can narrow down and say, okay, I only want to see tasks for this month for Sample Beauty Salon. You can do it another way, and you can say, okay, well, my job, my role right now is to try and get all the HST done. So limit the list of all the things we need to do to only tasks that are HST, GST related, so that I can narrow down the list and I can just work on those tasks. The same holds true in February. You can say, okay, show me all T4s that we have scheduled with the clients, and let's knock through them and let's get them done. And you can isolate by T4s, T4As, T5s, and any of the other types of tasks that you're going to be doing. Okay. You can also do a search based on the employee assigned. So each task is ultimately going to be assigned to a specific employee, and you can drop this down and say, okay, I want all tasks assigned specifically only to David Mayer. So this would be very, very relevant for different staff members. They're going to come into Client Track and they're going to be able to say, okay, just show me the tasks assigned to me, and they can crunch through their workload. This brings up a good point, is that each staff member generally going to be doing the same searches over and over again, depending on what their role is in the company. So each staff member can save their favorite searches so that they're not coming in here and setting all these parameters over and over again. They can just simply pull down from effectively a list of bookmarks and say, okay, my favorite search is all GST assigned to me due by the end of the month. Just show me that list without having to go through and configure these particular check marks. You can also search by what we call supervising partner and managing account. So when you set up your clients initially, you can assign the clients from an ownership point of view to specific employees. And we've named those two levels of ownership. The first level will be supervising partner, and the second level will be managing account. So effectively what you can do is you would have a certain subset of clients that would be assigned to you as a managing accountant, because the clients call you, you know the client's file, and you're effectively the owner of that particular client. You would be able to do a search and say, okay, show me all tasks due by the end of June where I am assigned as a manager for the client, regardless of whether I may or may not be the actual employee assigned who's going to be doing the actual processing of the tasks. Under search dates, you can search for any date range you want, and under search status, you can search by our assembly line check marks. So I'll show you that. So you can see that we've set up a three-step process for basic tasks: receive, process, and close. You have a lot of flexibility. You can set up way more steps than that. I just happen to have 3 visible. And so when information comes in the front door, you immediately say, okay, we have checked off that the task has come in. If I click just outside the check mark, I can see on what day that check mark was checked and who checked that check mark. So I have a process control. And when the information comes in, I would also, in this case, be able to say, well, where did I put the information? And I can say, well, we put the information in filing cabinet 45. So everybody would be able to see that information right there. Now, a very important metric in terms of viewing this list is you're like, okay, I want to see all tasks assigned to me and where the information's in the office. So I'm going to do advanced search, and I'm going to say, show me all tasks assigned to David Merritt where the received check mark is checked. And I'm going to go perform search. So this is now a very, very meaningful list for me, because these are tasks assigned to me where the information has come in and I can see where the file is. So I didn't have to get up. I didn't have to run around the office. I didn't have to ask anybody. The information was there in real time that I could literally do a search for in a few seconds and get that information. So this is the kind of thing that really makes an office efficient, is that everybody can see exactly what's going on in terms of that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to back up a bit, and I'm going to show you the really cool feature where you can automatically notify your clients of their upcoming tasks. Okay, so we go back to the business client section, and I'm just going to go to the HST tab as an example for the Sample Beauty Salon. I want to set up Client Track so that this client, the Sample Beauty Salon, will get an email that will remind the client before each of these tasks comes due. And that's what this notify check mark is here. So if I click notify for this first item, you can see here that the task is actually due to Revenue Canada on March 31st. The period end ends the last day of the previous month, in this case February 28th. The client is going to get an email on March 11th. And March 11th is 15 days prior to the 31st, 15 business days. So ignoring weekends and holidays is counting backwards. Now, I can change that metric in terms of how many days prior to the due date I want the client to get the email. And I can change it depending on what type of task it is. So I can tell Client Track when I do the setup and configuration that I want the clients to automatically get an email, say 30 days before the task comes due for all quarterly GST, HST. I might want the client to get an email 20 days for all monthly quarterly GST, I might want the client to get an email, say 2 or 3 days before the payroll comes due, because that's all the notice they need. So you'd be able to identify exactly how many days prior to each type of task you want the emails to go out. So we now have 4 methods to notify the client. In most cases, you're probably going to use email as a method, but we do have the ability to generate fax letters or to remind you to call the client on the appropriate day. If I choose email, it automatically creates the email subject, the body, and will put in the client's email addresses here. So in this case, it's specifically addressed the email to Sarah Stylus, who is the default contact for the Sample Beauty Salon, and says your GST is due on Monday, March 31st. Please arrange to drop off the paperwork. And it's used a template comment that you can define. So you would be able to change this template comment the client track uses to create these emails to add whatever information you like. Your own telephone numbers, you can take out sentences, you can do whatever you like with this. So if I go finish, it says the client will be notified of their upcoming task by email on Tuesday, March 11th. I go OK. So you can see that the check mark is now checked to tell us that there is a notification scheduled to remind the client of their March 31st GST. If I want to notify the client of all of these, generally I don't want to have to go through that 3-step process for each of these. I can simply go auto notify all above and choose finish. And I've now set up 4 emails that will notify the client before each of these deadlines comes due. Okay, so if we do another example, if I go to the payroll source, you can see that there is actually already email scheduled for here. So if I go to payroll, I want to send an email to the client for each of these biweekly payroll to remind the client several days before the payroll is due to submit their employees' hours to me so that I might process that payroll. So I'm going to go notify all above and go finish. And now I have set up an automatic email for each of these. Now, it's important that I talk about what happens next. I have effectively told Client Track to send an email to remind the client. But those emails are not going to go out without you knowing what's going on. If I go to Client Communication, I go to Auto Notification Wizard, this is listing all of the emails that are supposed to go out either today on June 25th or any day prior to this. And this window will pop up automatically when myself or anyone else using Client Track opens Client Track in the morning. So when you open Client Track in the morning, it will say, hello, today you have 10 emails to send, or today you have 5 emails to send. And it will present you with the emails that have been scheduled in the system to go out on that day. Now, you now have total control of whether that email actually does in fact go out. Because there's many times you're going to want to cancel the email because maybe the client already brought their stuff in. You might have already completed the task, or you had a conversation with the client before you turned on Client Track, and the client is already aware that they need to bring it in and have made arrangements to bring it in later this week. So you don't want to send out that email to bother them again. So when the email comes up, there's lots of cases where ultimately you want to cancel that particular email. And you simply do that by clicking Cancel Send in this list here, and that email for that particular task effectively got canceled, but it will still be scheduled for next year. So it'll still remind you to send out the email next year, and you can choose whether or not to send it out. For those remaining emails that you want to send out, you can click the individual Send Now button, or you can just click this button saying Send All Emails after you've canceled any emails that you want to cancel. What will happen when I click Send is it'll show me the message that's going to be sent, and if I go Finish, it will now integrate with my default email program, and in my case this is going to be Outlook, so we'll just give Outlook a second to think here. And I can now add attachments. I can do whatever I like to this email. So there's my Outlook email, and it'll put the client's email address in there had it been entered. I can add attachments. I can add my signature. I can CC anybody else. I can do anything I want because this is now a pure Outlook email. And I can close this because we don't actually want to send it. Okay, and so you can see that Client Track has told me that this email has been sent and on what day that particular email was sent. So I would be able to manage all of my communications. So once again, if you have 5 to 10,000 or more tasks scheduled throughout the year, and you've enabled this feature for most of those tasks, a convenience factor for both you and the client, so the client gets an opportunity to bring the information on time. You get to control that process each morning and let the clients know which emails they want to get. Okay, so so we've sort of gone through a large part of the assembly line now. So we've identified how to schedule the task, how to notify the client, how to record when the information comes in. One little feature I'm going to show you is dealing with missing information. So it's one thing to record that the information has come in, but let's say 2 weeks later you actually go to work on the file to process the information, and you open up the file, and it's only then 2 weeks after the client brought it in that you realize the client forgot something, or the file can't be completed because you need the client to answer a question. So what I can do here is I can say, okay, I'm working on, for example, this print financials for ABC Company. And if I click on the word ABC Company, it will take me directly to ABC Company's profile. And if I go to more info, what we have here is we have some grids here. The first grid shows you missing information. The second grid shows you client communication. So ideally, what I want to do is the moment I realize that I'm missing something, and this applies just as equally to a T1 return as it does to anything that I might be doing over the course of a year for a business client. The moment I realize that I'm missing something, I want to record it. I want to tell the client, hey, we're missing something. Can you bring it in right away? And then I want to move on. But I want to be in a position where when I record the missing information, if that client calls in and somebody else picks up the phone 5 minutes later, the person who picks up the phone should have that information that I've indicated I need right on their screen, so that they don't have to say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what's missing. I'm going to have to transfer you to somebody else, which means you've now interrupted two people. And often if the person has said, oh yeah, I remember I need something from the client, but what was it that I need? So now you have to find the file, you have to open the file, you have to look at sticky notes and all that type of stuff. So there's a whole process that can be very inefficient when it can be very, very easy. And I'm going to show you how easy this can be just for the missing information. So I'm working on a file. I realize right now that I'm missing something. I'm going to add a missing information for ABC Company. So I'll put the date that this information has been recorded. I can identify, is this a document or is this an outstanding question? And let's say that I'm missing the visa statement. For June 2014. Okay, and so I can record. Client Track is automatically put my name in because I'm logged into Client Track, so it knows that I am David, and it's recorded that I have logged this missing item. It's automatically assigned this missing item to ABC Company because that's the company we had focus on. I'd be able to identify and say any other client if I want to. And down in the notes here, I'm going to put a date stamp, so put today's date and time in, and I'm going to just paste in the same thing I typed up in the subject, but I'm going to add a little bit more information. So for credit card ending in, and I'm going to put the last 4 digits of this credit card. So this is enough information that when ABC Company calls in and anyone else picks up the phone, all the information is right on the screen, and the person who picks up the phone can immediately say, yes, that's right. I can see that we're missing some information, and in fact, the information we're missing is a credit card statement for June, where the last 4 digits are these digits. When can we expect you to bring that in? So immediately, they were able to answer that, and they didn't have to interrupt anybody else. Now, when I'm initially entering this missing information, I can send an email right now to the client. So I'm going to say send notification to a client. I'm going to go finish, and we're going to go finish again. And I can now, so this is an Outlook email. Hi, we were working on your file. We noticed that we need the following document, and I can take out the date stamp if I don't need the client to see that email. And it puts in what I've typed in, and I can edit this and do whatever I like. And the email address in this case is blank, but that's just simply because we haven't entered an email for this client in Client Track. Had there been an email address entered, it would automatically be addressed directly to this client without me having to worry about that. Okay, So now that we've sent this email to the client, Client Track has automatically recorded the first step in this process, that the client has been notified on what day and by who. So I go OK. So I've done several things. I've recorded this as a missing item, I've notified the client, and I've given all of my colleagues the information at their fingertips to deal with this when the client eventually calls back in. And I can now move on to the next job, and I can be confident that this is going to be worked on by other people and tracked, and it's not going to be lost or fallen through the cracks. Okay, so I would be able to see a list of everything that might be missing for the client. There might be multiple items, particularly, again, if we realize that this works exactly the same way for T1 clients, where if you're working on T1 returns in a very busy and chaotic tax season, you might have 3, 4 different things, and some of them might be slips of paper, some of them might be questions, but it's all on the screen and everybody has access to that. If I open up the Advanced Missing Info form, I can actually see everything that is currently missing for all my clients, business or personal tax clients. So I can see that we're missing a T4 for David Merritt as a tax client. I can see that we're missing the T4 for second job for John Dorman. I can see that we're missing visa statements for Roof Builder and Beauty Salon. I can see by the check mark that some of these clients have actually been notified, so they're aware we're missing, but we're still waiting for an answer, and we're still waiting for the answer to be entered in our system. Ultimately, we're trying to resolve all of the missing items. So the resolve check mark gets checked once the client gets back to us, brings it in, and then we then complete the work that was required for that missing information in the first place in terms of entering data and processing that particular return or task. I can see, for example, all of the information that was typed in by the people who recorded these items initially, and then I can also see right on the screen the telephone number and the name of the person I need to call so that I can hire a student, especially in a very busy and chaotic tax season, and the student doesn't have to know anything about my clients or how to prepare a T1 return, but they have the ability to call all my clients and by the telephone number and the name and be able to chase down the clients so that the main employees in my office can focus our time on the important things like processing the things, and we don't have to be sidetracked by the whole chasing process and all the time that it can take to chase your clients, which can be very inefficient. Okay, so we also have a client communication section, and the intent here is that you can record every what we call communication. It might be an email, it might be an in-person meeting, it might be a telephone call, so that each staff member can quickly type in quick notes on what was said so that everybody else can see a sequence of conversations that different people in your office may have had with the client. And you can use this as a missed call logger. So this is a really neat feature. And so let's say my phone rings, and I'm going to click this button, Add New Communication Entry. So it puts today's date in, and I can drop this down, and I can, for example, say, was this an incoming telephone call, an outgoing, was it a meeting? And you can define what's in this list. So let's say we just received an incoming telephone call, and the client is calling because of, let's say, missing T4. So they just want a little bit more information on that T4. So that this communication log is recorded for ABC Company. The phone call originally came to David, so it was received by David, and I can put a date stamp, and I would put enough information here that would clearly and concisely summarize the entire conversation I have with the client. And I can have this window open at the same time I'm talking to the client so that when I hang up the phone, I can just click OK, and I don't need to take any extra time out of my day in order to record this information. I'm recording it as I'm talking to the client. So if I've answered all the client's questions and no further follow-ups required, I can simply click the resolve check mark to tell Client Track, okay, the telephone's resolved, it's entered, there's no further follow-up required, everybody's happy. Let's say in a different scenario that the client calls in and I have received the telephone call, but let's say that the client's trying to reach Jane, but Jane's not available because she might be in a meeting on the phone or otherwise out of the office. So I can assign this call to Jane as the intended recipient, but I'm still recorded that I received the call initially. And I'm going to leave the resolve check mark unchecked. Okay. Now I'm going to reverse this to show you what happens. So let's say that John took the call and the client's trying to reach me. Okay, so when I click OK, because I'm now the intended recipient and I wasn't able to take this call, when I click OK, I'm going to get a pop-up in the corner here, let's give it a second, that says I just missed a telephone call. So if I'm on the phone with another client, I can see who called and I can snooze this pop-up to remind me to call the client back when I'm finished my current call. Now, if I was out of the office, when I open Client Track in the morning, I'm going to be able to see all of the telephone calls that have been assigned to me that need to be addressed in terms of the fact that they have not been resolved. So I can see that these are all of the telephone calls that have come into the office where they have been assigned to me and they have not been resolved. So this is in effect my missed call log. And I can see who the client is, I can see the reason the client called, I can see the date and who initially received the call, I can read any notes that my staff or my colleagues have typed in, and I can see the telephone number and the name of the person I need to call back at. Okay, so all this information's there. This form will automatically pop up when I open Client Track in the morning to tell me that I've got, in this case, 7 calls where I need to call the client back. So by using that feature, the call logger feature, you're solving several problems in terms of you're solving the fact that you now have a recorded summary of each communication that each of your staff and colleagues have had with different clients, and you can see those in sequential date order. You've got, with the same tool, the ability to record in a program all of your missed calls to identify who needs to call the client back, what needs to happen, how long did that call take for us to get back to the client, all of that. So you now know you don't need to worry about sticky notes or pieces of paper on people's desks indicating that they missed a call. It's all recordable, trackable, and you can make sure nothing falls through the cracks. Okay, I'm going to show you the personal tax section because it's a really neat way to solve the problem of dealing with your personal tax returns in terms of identifying what the status of every single return is, where are we at, what are the problems, and then I'm going to show you how you can do the same type of thing for managing your corporate tax returns, which are going to be, you're going to have sequences of steps that need to be done to complete year-end returns for those people who do the financial statements and year-ends for their clients. And then I'm going to get briefly in on the time of billing. And I'm not going to spend too much time in all of these, but I'm just going to go over them as an overview to show you what the functionality is so that you can show you how this is going to add value in terms of using Client Track. And then if you're interested, we'd be more than happy to look at giving you more information and showing exactly how all the different functionality works. Okay, so let's take a look at the personal taxes. So if I go to the personal tax list on the thing is, now somebody just asked me a question here in terms of what time do we end. I'm going to wrap this up in about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'll stay on the line and we can answer some questions that people have typed in and do that type of thing. Okay, so we have Bart Simpson as a personal tax client. If I go view list, this is really where I'm going to spend all of my time. And if I go all returns, you can see that I have a complete list of all of my T1 tax clients. Client Track is a really cool feature where I can import all your data from both the T2 and T1 components, so you won't have to do any data entry at all in order to get your name, social insurance numbers, addresses of all your tax clients for last year. And that also happens on the business client side in terms of being able to import information from Simply Accounting, QuickBooks, any of your T2 programs, that kind of thing. So we can really get this up and running quite quickly. With each T1 return, you can see that I've got a lot of really neat things that I can see with each return. In terms of what ClientTrack's doing, we don't care what the financial aspect or how complicated the return is. That's not what we're trying to do. Profile, CanTax, Tax Prep, all of those programs are very good at that. What we are giving you the ability to do is make sure that you know the status of every return, that nothing falls through the cracks, and you can identify the returns that are on hold and completed and in progress. So on that note, I'm going to say I've got this list of clients and I can see what the general status of each client is. So let's say I've got Jane Owner here, and when you first import your clients, all your clients are going to be set to the status awaiting client. You're waiting for the client to come in and give you the information. Once the client comes in, you set them to in progress, and then you can click the check mark here that says received all docs. The moment you click this check mark, we date stamp the day that all the documents have come in, and then we allow you to set what we call the in-house due date. And you can see most of these due dates are set for July and June, and that's just because I've been showing people recently. The fact of the matter is this is all going to be used before April 30th within your busy tax time from January to the end of April. So you can identify when the client's brought their information in, and then the due date is when you want to try and target to get that return done. So all the returns ultimately have to be done April 30th or June 15th, but you can identify and say, okay, well, we have a goal. Well, we want to try and turn around our returns in 2 weeks from the day the clients bring the information in. So if the client brings in the information on a certain day, you can set your in-house due date for that same client to do 2 weeks after that date so that you can identify which returns you want to get done sooner rather than later to meet that turnaround time for all your clients. And we will then have this counter that tells you how many days this return has been in your office. So from the day that ultimately you receive the information to the day that it gets completed, we will count that many days so you can see what your turnaround is for each return, and you can see what the average is at the bottom. And then you can see where is the file in the office, who's assigned to that file. You can also identify who might be assigned as a managing accountant, supervisor, partner. And then you have this really cool process control. So this is truly our assembly line thought philosophy in terms of tracking this. So we want that return to come in the front door and out the back door as a completed return as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And you need to identify different steps that that return needs to go through to get in the front and out the back. So as an example, and you can change this, I have contacted, meeting, info received, process, verified, approved, printed, completed, signatures, so on and so forth. You change these steps. You identify the process you want. And you, as each step gets done, your staff and you can check off the different check marks, and you can identify exactly who has checked that check mark and on what date so that you can see exactly what the process is. Now, ultimately, when you're working on returns, you're going to come across returns where you have to put them on hold. So, again, if I'm working on Jane's return here, I can say, okay, I need to put this return on hold because we're waiting for information now. And if I click on Jane, I would be able to add to Jane's missing information here what it is that I need. I can contact Jane, the client, and say, hey, we need your rent receipts. And if Jane calls in, anybody can pick up the phone and see that. Okay, and I'd also be able to record any conversations that I have with Jane on the phone so that all my colleagues and staff can see and read what I may have said to Jane in terms of assurances for answering some of her questions or completing a return or any relevant information like that. Okay, so that's basically what we're giving you on the T1 side, is this really nice assembly line process control so that you can quickly identify and you can say, okay, show me all returns where we're waiting for the client to come in. Show me all returns that are on hold. Show me all returns that are currently in progress and ready to be worked on now. Show me all completed returns. Okay, so it's a very easy way to take control of what otherwise can be a very chaotic season in terms of determining who's brought their stuff in, who's on hold, what do we need, and who can work on what right now. All right. I'm going to show you very, very quickly what we call the project section, and this is part of our workflow part of Client Track. Now, if I forget or you need to leave, all of our pricing is on our website. So feel free to go to our website at clienttrack.ca, and it's all there, and it's all clear, and you'll be able to look at that. I'll go over the pricing specifically at the end of the presentation, but I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, in terms of the projects, the project is the same thing as we've set up for the T1 return, except that we allow you to set up different projects in terms of the number of steps or the different types of things you can be doing for a client. So you might be doing consulting projects. You might be doing year-end projects. Some of the year-ends might be notice to readers or engagements or audits. So you may work with another accounting professional, another accountant or a bookkeeper to complete the whole year-end return, but you might have an agreement with somebody else where we will do half of the year-end return, and then once we complete that half, we will pass off the file, and that other office will complete the file. So there's a lot of cases like that. So you can see here I've got an audit project which I've identified that has 8 steps. So if I edit this, you can see that this project has 8 steps, and the steps I've set up is contact, meeting, intake, engagement letter, processing, review, final approve, and finalize. Okay, so that's an example of something that you can set up. I've got a engagement project which just has 4 steps. I have a notice to reader which has 6 steps. So when I want to schedule a project for a client, I can easily do that. A project is simply a collection of steps that has to be done in order by different people. So we previously looked at scheduling your T1s and your GSTs and your other things. Typically, one person is going to work on that file from start to finish, get it done, and get it out the door. A project is dealing with the fact that for some bigger jobs, like your year ends and that kind of thing, one person needs to work on it initially, and then when they get that portion done, it gets passed on to another person. And then when that person gets it done, it gets passed on. So it's like a relay race to complete the overall project. So in terms of using it, I can see all the clients, I can see the different projects we have running, I can see who's assigned as a project, when the start date is for the project starts, and what the status is, and when we're trying to get this project completed in terms of a target end date. If I click down here, I can see the different project steps. So these are my notice to readers, and I would be able to see the different steps that I want to do. So if we switch it to an audit, I can see, for example, for my audit projects, that we have steps: contact, meeting, intake, engagement, processing, review, final approve, and finalize. So I'm going through things very, very quickly, but more just to show you the functionality as opposed to trying to show you from a training point of view. Okay, and just like in the T1 section, for each step I can see who's assigned to that step and on what day that step is done. If different staff members are assigned to individual steps within a project, they would be able to see those project steps on their own task list. So I can see that David is assigned to the intake project and specifically the finalized step of the electric company. Okay, so it's all there on the screen. Now, let's take a look really quickly at the time and billing, because this is a necessary evil that we all have to do in terms of running our accounting practice. As I said at the beginning, we make the time and billing rather flexible to account for different philosophies in the way in which you want to track your time. If you're in a position where you want to track how much time you're working on each file, you can easily do that. We have timers, so you can say, okay, I'm working on a file and I want to record the duration I'm working on. And that works for some people. Some people like that, other people don't. But we give you the flexibility to choose how you want to do it. Ultimately what happens is, if I go back here, this is an example of a time calendar. Okay, so this is a time calendar for the user David, and I would be able to see the time calendars for other staff members as well. So I can see that on Monday I work from 9 to 11 Sample Beauty Salon on the T4. If I want to add, all I have to do is click right here, and I can essay what I did. So I can say, okay, I worked on Sample Beauty Salon, I worked for 1 hour, I worked on the GST quarterly, specifically the first one, and it automatically fills in a description of my work. We have internal and we have an invoice description. based on the fact that I've chosen this, and I go OK, and we have just added a new time entry. I can quickly add time entry very, very quickly. A lot of people like to record time on a piece of paper or in a logbook, and you might have somebody else translate that time into the system. So in that case, I want to enter, for example, all time from start to finish from 9 to 5 that I did on Friday the 20th based on what was entered by staff member in a logbook. So I'm going to go quick entry, and I would be able to say, okay, I want to say what I did on June 20th for David, and I would be able to drop this down and say, okay, I worked on beauty salon first thing in the morning, I worked in their GST, and then I worked for 1 hour, and then I worked on, say, electric company, and then I worked on, for example, their employee payroll, and I worked for 30 minutes. Okay, and I would be able to continue doing that type of thing, and I can just type in what I'm doing. And you can see that based on what I'm selecting, it's automatically typing in sort of a predefined comment. And this is very, very nice. It means that I don't have to spend the time typing all these descriptions, but I can change them if I need to. And I go OK, and there are my time entries. And I could have continued doing that right to the end of the day. Ultimately, what we're doing is each person is, responsible for filling in their own time. Again, if you want to do this type of time tracking, and you end up with your time list. So this is all of your WIP, and you can see, is it WIP? Does it need to be invoiced? Has it already been invoiced? You can see what it is that you did, and then you would be able to create invoices. So if I want to see all beauty salon, all WIP, so this is all of my current outstanding WIP assigned to beauty salon. If I want to create an invoice based off this, I can select which items I want, go add selected time to new invoice, and I can do several things. So I can set it up so that we're billing the time directly off of this. I can set up different columns so I don't have to show the date, the hours, or the rate. And these are all set to 0 just because we haven't put any billing rates in. But what I can do is if I want to hide this, so I want to add the WIP to an invoice so that I can cost out how much the work has cost me, but the client shouldn't see it because we bill the client just a flat rate. So I can go, okay, I want to hide the WIP. So the WIP is still assigned to the invoice, but it's just not visible from a client point of view. And I can add custom items. So I can say, okay, I just want to add an item for monthly accounting. We charge this client a flat rate of $350, and I can elaborate on a description, say monthly accounting for June 2014. And go save and close. So what I've effectively done is I've added in the one line item I want the client to see, billed at a $350, but in the internal reporting within ClientTrack, I would be able to see for each invoice how much work we added to that invoice, and I'd be able to see, did we make money that month or did we lose money? So I might have added to this invoice $400 of billable time in terms of cost in our labor, and I charged the client $350 this month. So that means I lost $50 this month. But next month, maybe I've only done $50 worth of work, and I'm still billing at $350. So next month we made $300 on the labor for that particular month. So I can see for each month whether I'm over and under, and I can see obviously for a time period over the course of 6 months or a year what our total profit is for each client. And this is nice because now I'm still billing at a flat rate. The clients love it, but I can see, am I profitable for every single client, and exactly what's my cost, and I can see, well, actually on average, we actually make a lot of profit on our GST, but we make very little profit. In fact, we're losing money on all the payroll time we're doing because we're not charging enough. You would be able to see all of that dynamics. Okay. So I'm going to wrap up the presentation. So I want to thank you all very much